the Soviet-Russian presence in Afghanistan lasted a decade. I think it was almost a decade to on the dot until February 1989 when the
Exactly.
final. Um, so so what happens after that? Afghanistan falls into a prolonged period of civil war, which was brutal
Yeah,
and very unfortunate. Um,
very true.
First of all, how did that happen? Could that have been avoided? Was that inevitable after such a long period of kind of external powers playing their role within the country and then a vacuum being created? Or could that have been avoided?
Yeah, that's more of a subjective, question, and would require a subjective, answer as well, because one cannot predict the how great powers are behaving when it comes to their interest in conflict, and wars are not something that one can predict at the end of the days. Starting war is it's easy, but ending how to end the war, it is one of the biggest questions before any military general or the states which prefer war as a mean of to achieve political objectives. So that's the biggest dilemma for for Afghanistan as well as for Pakistan, altogether, because the person who was the masters of war in Afghanistan, it was the General Ziaul Haq at that time. So General Ziaul Haq, was assassinated, was killed. For example, he was coming from Bahawalpur, after attending a public rally. So his plane was, bombed. It was just crashed, and even along with him, the then U.S. ambassador was also killed. So even the one who was leading this war in Afghanistan from Pakistani side, he was unable to, conclude that war. So and it had an impact on the repercussions
For sure.
and the aftermath of Soviet disintegration. So the invasion of the Soviet invasion actually sparked a decade-long conflict. As you have mentioned, from 1979 to 1989 with so Afghan mujahidin, which were normally called as resistance fighters, they received support from United States, Pakistan, and other countries. The conflict resulted in significant loss of life and widespread destruction, with millions of Afghans becoming refugees and internally displaced persons. And more than 5 million Afghani refugees ended up into Pakistan. We know that the Soviet Union eventually withdrew its forces in 1989 under an agreement marking the end of the occupation, but the country was left in a state of chaos and instability. So the aftermath was that we saw, an Afghan civil war that almost continued from 1992 to 2001, till the time of 9/11 incident. So the Afghanistan was plunged into a civil war, which was characterized by fighting between various mujahideen factions, who were vying for power. Earlier, they were fighting against the Soviet forces, but when Soviet forces were no more there, they were fighting with each other to grab more power, to amass more power. So the collapse of the communist government led to the formation of a fragile coalition government in Afghanistan, but internal, divisions quickly emerged, leading to widespread violence and instability in the country. And the warlords and regional militias, they exerted control over different parts of the country, contributing to lawlessness and human rights abuses in Afghanistan. So that was one Afghanistan in terms of geography, but there were so many different regimes working within Afghanistan. The civil war further devastated, Afghanistan's economy and infrastructure, and exacerbating the suffering of its population. So which resulted another dimension of Afghanistan, and that was actually the rise of Taliban, which in more precisely started from 1994 till again 2001, till the time of 9/11 incident. So in this, against the backdrop of civil war and instability, these mujahideen got their own faction named Taliban, so who emerged as a powerful force in Afghanistan by the 1994. So comprised largely of Pashtun students who were, studying in some madrasas, or who have already studied in madrasas. So the movement promised to restore order and enforce strict Islamic law, which is normally as Sharia in the country. So with sport, it is it is said to be believed that with the support of Pakistan and other actors, the Taliban rapidly gained control over large parts of Afghanistan, including the capital Kabul in 1996, and then they were recognized by Pakistan, and on the behest of Pakistan, Saudi Arabia and UAE also recognized Taliban regime by 1996. So the Taliban regime imposed harsh and oppressive rule, as we know that, implementing strict social codes, restricting women's rights, and harboring extremist groups like Al Qaeda. So the Taliban's rules was overall it was characterized somehow by widespread human rights abuses and international isolation, leading to sanctions and condemnation of from the international community. So afterwards, we know that in 2001, the incident of 9/11, led another invasion to Afghanistan. So, but again, it's a political contextualization of war against terrorism. The way Soviets entered in Afghanistan, it was called an invasion. The same very way when US started its Operation Enduring Freedom regarding war against terrorism campaign. So it is again, mentioned by many that it was US-led invasion in Afghanistan. So that happened altogether.
Very true.
Yeah.
How did it happen that so for 7 years or so after the withdrawal of Soviet Union, uh, we had very powerful war-hardened factions fighting each other within Afghanistan. Um, at that time, Taliban didn't exist, and then as you say, they came out of nowhere, more or less, came into our conscience in 1994, and then within a couple of hours, they were inside controlling the capital, Kabul. So, who were these people? Were these people a new generation, or were these people um, aligned with some of these factions, but then separated and then created a new entity? How was the Taliban movement created?
Yeah, it's a very interesting story because these groups which are normally known as mujahideen,
Hmm.
they were in total 7 groups, which were trained on the behest of the United States, proxy war in Peshawar, in Pakistan's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. They were provided logistics and training to operate in Afghanistan, and they were operating very well. Somehow, in terms of skills, they were not up to that level where they can outcast, a strong military force of the Soviet Union, who have been able to conduct war based on icons of warfare, tanks and aircrafts and all things. So, but they were very well trained in terms of carrying the proxy war in Afghanistan, and they did a good job there. And that's why they called Mujahideen and the freedom fighters for the world at the end of the day. But the composition of these mujahideen were, altogether representing different communities of Afghanistan, Pashtun and non-Pashtun. And most of them were fighting in their own, geographical proximity. So they were there and they were fighting for the greater cause of liberating Afghanistan from the Soviet, shackles of slavery, and a lot of different names were given to that. So once Soviet disintegrated, the biggest problem was that, as Hillary Clinton, the former Secretary of State of the United States, also mentioned in one of the interview that, it was the Ronald Reagan who created this insurgency, the Republicans, and once when they achieved their objective in Afghanistan, they just abandoned Afghanistan and they just left Pakistan, at the behest of the then, emerging challenges. So the US was not there to take care of it and how to conclude that, a decade-long insurgency war. So the absence of the Western powers, particularly the absence of the United States of America, who was the main leader behind this orchestration of proxy war, was has created a gap, has created a vacuum. So no one knew that how to go ahead. And I have already mentioned that the master of the war, General Ziaul Haq, who was leading the war at the front from the Pakistani side, he was again no more alive. He died. So because of these changes, so the region was not able to get into that context there where stability or peace could be the future course of action. So everything went into a kind of situation where everyone started moving ahead. So that's why the Mujahideen were incapable of negotiating in between themselves. So they started fighting. So when they started fighting, that created a lot of challenges for the followers of that time who were unable to find a cause, which was the religious cause to fight against a common enemy. So when they were fighting with each other, they were all Muslims, all these seven groups. So that
Yeah.
disorientation within the ranks and files of Mujahideen were not sellable within different tribal, cultural, contestation within political, stability of Afghanistan. So through this, new factions, got their, independent outlook. So, 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 so the biggest stakeholder at that time in terms of a sovereign nation was Pakistan, because, as I've told you, there are 12 provinces which are bordering with Pakistan,
Hmm.
and these 12 provinces share around 2,611 kilometers border, and most of these provinces are Pashtun provinces. So that border does not have any fence or any security layer. So it is just like a village is stretched between two countries. Like half of the village is in Afghanistan and half of the village is in Pakistan. So they say share same language. It's the same families. So it was a kind of worry for Pakistan, because the kind of jihad which was introduced in Afghanistan, the same Sharia, the same jihad would would idealize so many different factions to be implemented in Pakistan, because so many Pakistani Pashtun community were actually in Afghanistan fighting against the Soviet Union. So when the Soviet Union disintegrated, they came back. They came back with the same ideology. So Pakistan was at the crossroads, at, at the behest, at the mercy of these non-state actors carrying an ideology which does not have any direction at all. Only violence, only with force you can do whatever you can. And how can Pakistan suddenly tell them that now the political objective is achieved and you should not be carrying the same global political objective towards Pakistan or any other part of the world. So this was again Pakistan's apprehensions to secure its own borders, and it was having a close eye over Afghanistan. And all these different mujahideen groups were expecting from Pakistan that Pakistan would provide them shelter and Pakistan would provide them political legitimacy. So this group needs to be the sovereign group of Afghanistan, leading political process in Afghanistan. So every group expected from Pakistan, and Pakistan cannot settle down them. Pakistan
Hmm.
was unable to settle them. So that situation actually created a chaos for almost 4 or 5 years. So in between, when this happened, so some natural process of uh, building an order was started within Afghanistan, within these students or youths which were studying in different part of Afghanistan, and they were already part of these Mujahideen clusters. So somehow they mobilized themselves, and an incident has been quoted that something happened in part of Afghanistan, and this Mullah Umar, who was once jihadist and fighter for one of the groups, Mujahideen groups, and during a war, even he lost his one eye. So he was just running a madrasa, a mosque. So a complaint came to him, and he was just he walked with that complainant to address his complaint. So when he interacted with the other accused group, and the settlement was unable to resolve the issue, so they start fighting with each other. So Mullah Umar was able to fight well, and he was able to kill others. So when this news spread around that he's a man who can protect us, so a civil disorder is going on between the mainstream Mujahideen groups, but within Afghanistan these kind of things are happening. So people started coming along with Mullah Umar, and he started bringing more tribals with him. So that gave birth to a movement of Taliban. So that those Talibans, when they started fighting with the so-called Mujahideens by denouncing the way of their fight and politics, so it gave momentum an impetus to a kind of force, which then in 1994 was formally became it, the Taliban, and of course in Pakistan, keeping in view its own national security priorities, had to get along, because talking to Taliban was quite easy as compared to talking to other factions of mujahideen, which were not coming on together on one page or one platform. Yeah. So that's how it they were united in Pakistan back then.